Hi, welcome to Splash and Go. Nate Ryan here with Dustin Long. And Dustin, Bristol Motor Speedway this Saturday night. 3 races to go in the regular season and 2 drivers who are on the cusp of potentially not making the playoffs in surprising fashion. Clint Bowyer and Jimmie Johnson. Bowyer just ahead of the cut line, Johnson just behind it. And what strikes me here, Dustin, is these are not only 2 drivers at critical junctions in their seasons, but also quite possibly their careers. And let's start with Bowyer. He doesn't talk about it much, but this is a contract year for him. How pivotal do you think it is for him to make the playoffs and returning to Stewart-Haas Racing? And do you have a sense of when we're going to hear timing on his future?
Well, I think it's been really interesting about silly season this year with timing. In years past, we've kind of heard decisions already by this time of drivers that aren't returning or some changes that are going to take place, and we haven't heard any of that yet. And I think it's partly because it's just taking longer to get contracts put together or to get sponsors put together, sponsorship for next year. So there's a lot of things up in the air. So I think that's why it's being, strung out even longer. I think bottom line is no matter what Clint Bowyer does on the track, if he can provide the sponsorship for Gene Haas, I think that's the big thing. Gene Haas obviously can afford to sponsor, the cars out of his own pocket, but he doesn't want to keep doing that as he's done that the last several years. So I think sponsorship's going to be the key thing. If Clint Bowyer has it, then I think Clint Bowyer can be back in that car. If driver X finds it and comes to Stewart-Haas Racing, then that may change things up and may force Clint Bowyer to go looking for something else.
All right, so his future might be less dependent on results. Jimmie Johnson, however, we're a little bit more certain of how things lay for him. He's got a contract through 2020. He told us at Watkins Glen that really the next few months are going to determine if 2020 will be his last year. So if he misses the playoffs, Dustin, for the first time in his career, 7-time champion, does that impact, do you think, whether Jimmie Johnson races beyond 2020?
No. I think the biggest impact to what Jimmie Johnson, whether he races beyond the 2020, is how well he works with crew chief Cliff Daniels. Jimmie has talked about, and he's been very vocal this summer, or even since May, about how he was patient throughout his career, but time is running out, and how he wants that 8th championship. That's why the move was made with the crew chief change. Look, you think about when the change with Kevin Meendering, they'd only been to the same track a couple different times. Everybody talks about you get better the second time around, and that change was made quickly. So this gives Jimmie 15 races with Cliff Daniels, 5 races to get into the playoffs, and if it doesn't work, 10 races to get in the playoff, 10 races in the playoffs to see how well they work together. Is this the combination that can take Jimmie through 2020 and beyond? And I think really this is a key period for Jimmie, because I wouldn't be surprised if he does what Jeff Gordon did when Jeff Gordon announced his that he was going to retire, is that he announced it in January. Hendrick Motorsports announced then and said Chase Elliott was taking over. It was going to be done before the season. I think Jimmie, if it's not done before the season, a decision, I think it'll be in the spring of next year that he'll know an announcement will be made if he's returning or not, because you've got to plan the sponsorship for the following season. So I think, everybody's making a big deal about whether Jimmie gets in the playoffs or not. I don't think it matters because he's not a championship contender. I think the big thing is what happens these 15 races. How well can he work with Cliff Daniels? Is Cliff Daniels the crew chief that can help turn things around for Jimmie Johnson and give him a chance to win an 8th championship? If not this year, certainly I don't think that's going to be the case, but next year.
All right, well, Bristol will be the 3rd race that Jimmie Johnson has with Cliff Daniels. So let's size up both Johnson and Bowyer at Bristol. Johnson has traditionally not been strong there, Dustin. Has 3 wins, but has struggled a little bit recently, and now he has to worry about gaining points. Bowyer seems more confident. He's almost won there a couple of times in the last few years. Restarts have been a problem. How do you size up Bristol in terms of their playoff chances?
Clint Bowyer's got the better chance of winning. I think no doubt about that. The one thing I like about Clint is that he's qualified well, throughout the summer stretch where he hasn't had the good finishes. And part of it is, it's like what he talked about after he was eliminated on Sunday. It's like they run well and fast in practice and qualifying. In the race, the car is not as good. And so now he gets caught in the back of the pack, middle of the pack. He gets hit by Paul Menard at Michigan because he's running in the middle of the pack, and that causes him to crash. You think about New Hampshire, he has that crash on the restart with Martin Truex Jr. because they're back in the pack, in the middle of the pack. They've got to figure out how to get that car better, and if they can, I think that this is a better track for him. Jimmie, I think it's just they've just got to try to be consistent and avoid any issues, and they've just they've not been as strong the last few weeks. And again, it's another week to work with Cliff Daniels.
All right, well, we'll see how he does with that new crew chief. And Clint Bowyer, we mentioned, also on Motor Mouths this week, NASCAR America, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern on NBCSN. Thanks for watching Splash and Go.
Hey Motorsports fans, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe before you go for all the latest news and highlights across motorsports.